Doctor, how do you pronounce your last name? He said, it's Dr. Ken. So I'll go along with that. For spelling, it's Howayeck, Dr. Ken. If you can hold your questions until after the presentation, we'll give you a chance to ask all your questions after the speaker is finished. Let me give you a little information on Dr. Ken. He's an author and lecturer, and he's also an osteoporosis educator and testing interpreter. He is the founding director of Bone Health Network. He is the author of self-help books, including the popular book, Bone Health Made Easy. Osteoporosis is a very important part of our prostate cancer treatments because the drugs that we have to take contribute to osteoporosis. The hormone drugs that we take contribute to osteoporosis. Also, when your bones get more shallow, the cancer can invade more easily. So it's very, very important, even though osteoporosis doesn't sound like a cancer treating or cancer subject, it is, it really is. Dr. Ken operates a company out of Alameda called 5-Star On-Site Testing. And he has information here and outside that you can find out of, which provides on-site ultrasound bone density screenings and osteoporosis counseling at events, doctors' offices, expos, various senior living centers, and corporations. And with his love for this issue being quite evident at every turn. In recent years, Dr. Ken has spoken at various educational forums to both professionals and laypersons. As a credentialed and board-certified foot and ankle surgeon, Dr. Ken is currently retired from 22 years in private practice in order to address fully his long-term passion of combating osteoporosis in ways that he feels are most genuine and most effective, and yet are ways that are presently underutilized and certainly less understood than they should be. He is a certified speaker for the Foundation of Osteoporosis Research and Education. How many people out there have had bone density tests for osteoporosis? How many people are qualified to have or have found that they have osteoporosis? Well, you know, a lot of people that have tested, you did a good job getting tested, and I'm surprised that not more of you have it. Surprisingly enough, men get osteoporosis just as much as women. We think of it as a women's disease, but it's not. Especially prostate cancer men have to be very careful of it. So tonight, Dr. Ken will talk about how surprisingly common osteoporosis is among men, just how big an issue is it when a man breaks his hip, surprising statistics around the issue of osteoporosis, and the issue of chemotherapy, and I might add hormone therapy, as it relates to osteoporosis. How to reliably and fundamentally improve one's bone density, and it's actually not what you're hearing. With that, let me bring to the podium Dr. Ken.
Can you all hear me okay? I tend to talk loud. Everybody can hear me all right? How about a round of applause for Russ? And thank you, Russ, for putting this together. You did a great job with everything. So, I'm going to talk about bone health made easy. That's my job, is to make it easy for people to understand. So, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my cell phone off, so I'm not going to disturb you. So, the other thing I want to mention too is, as Russ said, if you can kind of reserve your questions toward the end, you're going to have questions. If you don't already have them, some of the things I say will probably bring up some questions. So if I don't catch you here, maybe I'll catch you out there where I'm screening people at the end. If anybody wants to be screened at the end of the talk, I'm going to make myself available for as long as necessary. It only takes 2 minutes. I would have you take your right shoe and sock off. I will give you a colorized results form. It's $20. I'll give you a form you can take to your doctor. It has a 2% margin of error. It's very accurate. You should do it. If you've not done it before, you should do it. And even if you have done it before, you should do it because it'll help you corroborate your previous results. So anyway, bone health made easy. Now here's the thing about that term. I'm not really making it easy. It already is easy. We've made it so darn hard, so darn murky and confusing unnecessarily. And you're going to be surprised just how easy things are. I'm going to give you a couple examples of just how much easier it all is than you've been led to believe. Do you know we're the only animal species on this planet who get osteoporosis? And I've corroborated this with different veterinarians. They don't see it. They never see it. So do you suppose it's because all these other animal species out there are taking courses in osteoporosis and we're not? Well, there's reason to believe that we once did not get it, and that we're not supposed to have it, and it's not a natural part of aging. You're being told a lot of interesting things that I happen to know are not true. How about this one? It's hard to get better. No, it is not. It's easy to get better. And I see lots of people get better. And you know what? In a minute, I'm going to do what your doctor does. And I'm going to scare the dickens out of you with some statistics. And I don't do it because I get any jollies out of scaring you. I'm doing it to alert you to the problem. And I talk all over the country. And I wouldn't be scaring people if I didn't at the same time know you could get better. And that you will get better if you want to get better, okay? Because I see lots of people get better. For example, this area here, formerly known as osteopenia. We're not supposed to use that word anymore, by the way. We're supposed to say borderline. This whole box, not just the line, but the whole box is borderline. Or you can say low bone density, but we're not supposed to say osteopenia. But a lot of people refer to this as pre-osteoporosis. I hate that term. That means you're about to get osteoporosis. It also means pre-better, pre-green, because you could be going up too. Okay? So if you go on Wikipedia tonight and you learn about osteopenia, and they go on and on and on. I happen to like Wikipedia, but they're going to go on and on and on about osteopenia, and I promise you, all it means is almost good and almost bad. That's all it means. It doesn't mean any direction. It doesn't mean anything different. The reason we're trying to get rid of that word is because it's a long word and it's confusing, and it almost sounds like a diagnosis, and it isn't. It sounds like something maybe you should be on a medicine for, and that's absolutely not true. You're not supposed to be on a medicine now for osteopenia. So let's start to make things easier, okay? And I'll tell you what's happened because we've made things so darn hard. Right now, 7 out of 10 people who have osteoporosis don't even know they have it. We've done a bad job of identifying it. We've done a bad job with the terms. We haven't tried to make it easy for people. You know, when I test people, and I've tested thousands of people, and I run into them down the line, or you know, we high-five and they tell me how they got better and all, I will ask them how they got better, and I'll ask them what their score is now. They won't know their score. They won't even remember what their original score is. Nobody remembers their score. But you know what they remember? They remember their color. And we're visual. People remember their color. I didn't make up these colors, but I'm trying to highlight them because I think it engages people. A lot of what I've done, what I've found out over the last few years, is how to engage people in this, as they should be, with facts and things that pertain to them. And I even have personal programs where I stay with a person for a week. Long distance, email, text messaging, phone calls, and I stay with them for a week. Because you know what I've also found out? For many of you to get better, you need to sit down with somebody for 2 or 3 hours. That's hard to do in a medical office. Doctors don't have 2 or 3 hours because I'm going to go through A, B, C with you, which pertains to everybody. That's how you get better. It's that simple, by the way. I'm going to go through A, B, C with you, but what I want you to know is those of you who are in trouble and you need to talk about A, B, C a little bit more, especially as it pertains to you, that's where someone needs to sit down with you and find out all the things you did right and wrong before, all the things you're doing right and wrong now, and all the things you get ready to do right or wrong, so that we can get you better reliably and faster, okay? But that takes time. But if you spend the time with a person, you get them engaged in their problem, they get better. Remember when we hated computers? Remember when we were scared of computers? We never thought there was any chance at all we would operate one, let alone own one, maybe own more than one. It all changed, didn't it? What happened? They made it easy. We do this with osteoporosis, I'm telling you, we're going to lick it. We are. We've got a big problem on our hand. In the next 30 years, the incidence of osteoporosis is going to go anywhere from doubling to tripling. This is the osteoporosis country. We consume more dairy than any country in the world. Go figure. Does that make much sense? It doesn't make much sense, does it? So we've got a big problem on our hand. It's huge and it's growing. And I'm telling you, and this I know from experience, if we dared to go into the elementary schools and high schools with that contraption over there, or any reasonable bone density device, we'd be shocked by what we find out. These kids are drinking soda, they're eating a lousy diet, they're not getting much exercise, they're doing everything wrong. Okay? So we need to catch people early. Not when your insurance company says you can now qualify for a DEXA because you're over 65 and you meet the risk factors. That's crazy. You need to catch things early. My machine will do a 5-year-old. Catch things early so you find out if it's in your family. You can alert other people. Catch things early so you can do more things about it. Because young people will get osteoporosis. It's crazy the way the system is set up. The system is set up to qualify for you whether or not you need that test. Well, you know what? You need the test. We all do. And they're going to say, well, you just had a DEXA scan. Looks like you don't need another one for 2 or 3 years. Wrong. The International Society for Clinical Densitometry, ISCD, these are the physicians and scientists throughout the world who take this issue very seriously. That makes the National Osteoporosis Foundation look like a social club. They say you can know your improvement in 6 months. You can know in as soon as 6 months whether you're getting better or not. In other words, whether your plan is working or not. You want to know whether your plan is working, right? Now, in 6 months, if you can know that soon and you find out that your plan is working, great, you stay with it. Now you're going to get better. If you find out in 6 months, because you tested that early, and you find out that your plan is not working, then you change it because you now know, and you can make that change. So that's why you need to do the testing much earlier and much more often than you're led to believe. Okay? Now, let's look at these terms. Osteoporosis. This looks like a quiet crowd. Let's find out how interactive you are here. Somebody tell me what osteoporosis is.
Losing bone density.
Losing bone density? Yeah, that's a good one. Anybody else want to share with me? What is osteoporosis?
Well, it's a thin bone that isn't solid. It's punctuated by...
Thinning of the bone. Yeah. Okay. So you could define it so many different ways, but the way you want to think of it is a way that you can commit it to memory and really understand it. Okay. Here's one way of thinking of it. It's red. Everybody knows red's bad, right? You drive your car through an intersection, the light's red, that means you have a high level of risk going through that intersection at that given time, right? Now, they use this color system with avalanches, they use it with Homeland Security. Everybody knows green's good and red's bad. High risk for fracture, low risk for fracture, moderate risk for fracture. Okay? Osteoporosis means porous bones in Latin. That's all it means. It just means porous bones. So now, I've cut through a lot of bones. I know what bones look like when you cut through them. I've always noticed that when you cut through bones, they kind of look like a sea sponge. And they've got similar holes and cavities in them, much like a sea sponge would have. So if you want to think of those cavities, those, we call them bone cells or labyrinths, think of them as bubbles. So tell me, if you have osteoporosis, those bubbles that I'm referring to that are in your bones, are those bubbles too little or are they too big? They're too big. What happens if those bubbles get bigger and bigger? Your bones start to get hollow, don't they? Now, the more porous your bones go, the worse you are. If they get really porous, they become hollow. The more dense, and that's the opposite, the better. They cannot be too dense. The denser, the better. So the higher you go, the better. Now this scale goes up to 2. The highest I think I've ever seen was a 5.3 on an African-American dietitian marathon runner. All right, she fit the bill. 5.3. I think the lowest I've seen is 4.8. So you can go really high, you can go really low. That machine will test whatever you are. It'll tell you what you are. It's brutally honest. And the two people who are glad they get tested are the person who scored really well and also the person who scored really poorly because they found out. Okay? All right, so now you know what osteoporosis is, but I don't want you to think of it that way. You could say, well, it's red, it's a negative 2.5 T-score. That doesn't mean a whole lot to you. Porous bones, maybe that means a little bit more to you. But this is the way I want you to think of osteoporosis. You know how you can break a bone because you fell? And that's normally the way it works. You fall and you break a bone. There's a sequence there. You broke a bone because you fell. That's not osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is not you falling and breaking a bone. Osteoporosis is you breaking a bone and falling. So now some of you are thinking, you know what, I think I get it now. I think I know what happened to that lady. You know, we were in the room, and this little lady we happened to notice off to the side fell on the ground. We actually heard her bone break. Some of us knew her. We knew she had pretty good balance. We don't know what the heck it was she tripped on. We never found out what made her fall. Well, she didn't fall and break a bone. She broke a bone on the way down. And that happens a lot. Things like you're waiting for the bus. Maybe you're brushing your teeth. Maybe you sneeze. Maybe you just look to your side and you broke your hip doing nothing. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what bones are like. By the way, I mentioned I've seen a lot of bones. I've held it in my hands. I've moved it. I've removed it. I've done lots of things with bones. I know what bones are like. By the way, what color is bone? Somebody tell me, what color is live human bone with no blood in the way? You have a tourniquet on the leg. You're looking straight at live human bone. What color is it? It's not white. No, it's not yellow. Yes. It's a light gray. But you know what I've noticed over the years? And this has made me scratch my head for a long time. Everybody seems to have a little different shade of light gray. I see like a lavender light gray. I see a pinkish light gray. I see a bluish. I see a darker, like a charcoal gray. A yellowish gray. And I never understood for a long time, why does everybody have bones that look different than the other person? Why does everybody seem to have a different appearance to their bones? What do you think?
Calcium. Calcium.
It's not calcium, and it's also not ethnicity, and it's not age. Diet? Well, that's partially true. Putting it in simpler terms, it's because of what the bone's made out of. Do you folks know all the things that bones do? Bones do a whole bunch of things. I'll run through them really quick. They don't just keep you from becoming a blob on the floor. Bones are a detoxifier. They are a buffering agent. They are a storing system for fatty acids. They make hormones, believe it or not. They make cells. They make red cells, white blood cells, and they make platelets. They make stem cells. They do all kinds of things. So when you make your bones healthy, a lot of things can happen. But when bones are made of something other than what they are, if they look weird, they look odd, that means they're made of something other than what they're supposed to be made out of. That's what I've noticed, because I've noticed that they get soft when they look weird, when they look discolored a little bit. They're softer. So I want you to imagine this, because not many people here probably have a surgical background where you know what a semi-blunt or surgical instrument is, but I want you to imagine a fork, which would be similar to a semi-blunt surgical instrument. You have a patient in front of you. This person has normal bone density. This patient has high bone density. They're normal. Their bone is presented right in front of you. You've got this fork, which hopefully you've sterilized before you bring it in the field. You have this fork aimed down. The business end is aimed down. And there's no way you're driving that fork through the bone. The bone is simply too dense, too strong. You cannot drive it through. But what if they happen to score in the yellow? If they're in the yellow, formerly known as osteopenia, now where they have a moderate risk of fracture, it's going through easily. Easily, because we break bone by accident all the time with our retractors. So bone can be that soft. So now you think, well, wait a minute. Now what about red? How soft is it when they're in the red? Well, I want you to imagine the same fork again. Aim down. But now I want you to aim it up. And I want you to change from your full fisted grip down to a 2-finger grip. With the blunt side going down, it's going through easily. Easily. So that's how soft bone can be. Now it shouldn't be hard for you to imagine that you could break a bone and fall. Now I know that a lot of people, probably including some of you, get these words mixed up. osteopenia with osteoporosis, and maybe you throw in osteoarthritis, and people often mistake that one for osteoporosis. They're not even related. They're not at all the same. They just happen to share the same first few syllables. Osteo means bone. Osteoarthritis is arthritis. In fact, it's 90% of all arthritides. You don't say arthritises, you say arthritides. Okay? 90% of them are wear and tear, damage-related, age-related arthritis, which is osteoarthritis. So don't get it mixed up with osteoporosis. In fact, if you think about it, osteoarthritis and osteoporosis are in some ways opposites. I'm going to pass this around. Just a little miniature hip bone, femur, which shows the joint part of the hip, the ball and socket, the ball that goes into the cup at the pelvis. And that's where osteoarthritis occurs, in the joint where there's cartilage. That's where hip replacements occur. So don't even relate hip replacements to hip fractures. They're in different areas. But I don't know how well you can see this, but it has a neck. It has a head and a neck. The femur almost looks like a body. It has a head, neck, and a shaft. The thinnest part, the neck, is where it breaks. Okay? And that's not in the joint. So osteoporosis doesn't occur at the hip joint in the same area. It occurs in the neck, whereas osteoarthritis occurs in the joint. Let's pass this around. So they're not in the same area. Osteoarthritis, you can feel. It hurts. It can hurt a lot. But no matter how much of it you have, no matter how much pain you might have from osteoarthritis, it'll never kill you. But osteoporosis is the opposite. Do you know you can die from osteoporosis? That's why they're called the silent killer. And no matter how low you go on this scale, you feel nothing. So I have people come up to me and they say, you know what, Dr. Howayeck? I think I have it. You can test me, but I'm almost positive I have osteoporosis, that my bone density is low. And I'll always say, you can't tell. You don't know until you test. It's silent. You feel nothing, and yet it can kill you. That's where it's kind of opposite to osteoarthritis. Okay? So, and I mentioned you can die. Now, do you know the number of women last year who died because they had osteoporosis outnumbered the number of women who died from breast cancer, ovarian cancer, cervical cancer, and uterine cancer combined? So you know that it's often associated with a postmenopausal woman, maybe a woman who's small frame, she has in the family, she's broken a bone before, she's on certain medications, maybe she's been on chemo, all these things that maybe you can't control too much of. She's Asian or Caucasian, all these things are uncontrollable risk factors. Why dwell on them? You can't control them. Try changing your gender, try changing your ethnicity. Why dwell on the things you can't control? But I know you men are thinking right now, you know what? I'm glad I'm not a woman. Guess what, man? I'm going to share a couple things with you. And this has to do with both men and women. Do you know, seems like we've got people over the age of 50 here. If you're over the age of 50, statistically, if you break your hip today, statistically, you will have a 24% chance of being dead in the next 12 months. Because of that break. So I'm going to say it differently, because 24% is kind of the same as 1 out of 4. 1 out of 4 who break their hip are gone within the year because of that injury. So you can die from osteoporosis. If you're lucky enough not to be one of those 24%, you still have a 75% chance of never fully recovering. So therein lies the disability part. Death and disability. Okay, I'm going to get back to you men now. That issue of actually being able to ultimately lose your life because you broke your hip, because we all know that if we break your hip, it's typically because you had osteoporosis, you had low bone density. But that statistic of 1 out of 4 who break their hip are gone within the year. Take that statistic and look at the men. Men who break their hip, who are over the age of 50, have a 46% greater likelihood to succumb to death from that fracture than the woman does. A man who breaks his hip does not do well. Why? We don't know. So, naturally, we all know about prostate cancer. Naturally, it's not as common as prostate cancer, right? Wrong. It's more common than prostate cancer. Osteoporosis is more common in a man. A man is more likely to get osteoporosis than he is to get prostate cancer. 1 out of 4 men will incur an osteoporosis-related fracture in a lifetime. So now, is it an issue for men? You bet it is. It's an issue for everybody. And as Russ said, anybody can get it. That's what the National Osteoporosis Foundation would want people to know. Anybody can get it, and that's why people need to be tested. Okay? So now you know the difference between these big words, these terms, and how they relate. Okay? On the other hand, if you have rheumatoid arthritis, those people have a high incidence of osteoporosis because it's an inflamed condition. They get generalized osteoporosis. Rheumatoid arthritis is a different ballgame. Those people do get osteoporosis by having it. Otherwise, osteoporosis does not lead to osteoarthritis, and osteoarthritis does not lead to osteoporosis. They don't even correlate. Okay? All right. So now I'm going to go over A, B, and C, but as I do, I'm going to pass this around, which kind of summarizes what A, B, and C is. The book I wrote, Bone Health Made Easy, covers some of this, but I'm going to cover it in a lecture form and in a way that you can kind of commit it to memory. A, B, and C are the things that you should be doing for your bone health. It's everything. It includes everything. And everything pertaining to your healthy bone health lifestyle falls into either A or B or C. So what is A? A is activity, B is bad stuff that gets reduced, and C is complete nourishment. But if you think about it, isn't that kind of what we've been told for our whole life about health in general? We're told to eat right, get plenty of exercise, and avoid bad things. That's what we're told, right? That pertains to bones, very much so. But if you focus in on those things that help bone the most, you're going to make big improvements. Okay? What I've noticed is your bone health should be a byproduct of the things you should be doing anyway. The most powerful forces for bone health are not the medicines. The most powerful forces are A, B, C, and medicines should come last. By the way, those of you who are on bisphosphonates like Fosamax or Reclass, Alendronate, Boniva, the Sally Fields medicine, Prolia, who says they're not a bisphosphonate, we know certain things about these medicines that we didn't know before. Nobody who scores in the green or yellow should be taking them. Nobody should be taking them under any circumstances more than 5 years. They came out in the middle 80s, and there are people who are still on them. They've got the dead jawbone syndrome we've been hearing about. That's a condition we didn't even have before these medicines came out. They have frozen bone syndrome. Maybe they broke their hip because they've been on the medicine too long. Okay? It doubles your risk for esophageal cancer. What you want to know about these medicines is these medicines are needed in an urgent care situation. They've never been healthy. They've always been an urgent care medicine. We're treating them as such now. Before, you might have gone into the doctor's office in the middle 80s and the doctor would say, you know, we have these new medicines for osteoporosis. I understand that you're not in the green, you're a little bit into the yellow. Let's get you back up in the green. Let's put you on these medicines, raise your bone density. They should never have done that. But they don't do that anymore. But we still have people who are still on them that long. So what do they do? What do these medicines do? Without getting into the details of osteoclasts and osteoblasts, understand that these medicines are designed to make your bones hard. They make your bones hard. Now, if your bones get hard, and they get harder and harder and harder, what can ultimately happen to your bones? They break. They become brittle and they break. Do you know your bones bend? You all know that your bones, I'm not talking about your joints, I'm talking about your bones. Do you know your bones bend? If your bones don't bend, they break. They've got collagen, they're like rubber bands. Collagen is protein that allows them to bend a little bit, to resist fracture. Okay? Do you also know that your bones are half water? Yeah, your bones are 50% water. What happens if you lose some of that water? What happens if you become dehydrated over a long period of time? Your bones start to be a little bit like chalk. Remember when we used to have blackboards? Chalk? Remember what chalk felt like in our hands? Remember we could actually drop it into a break? We could break chalk in our hands? There's no water in there, but that is all calcium. It doesn't have the magnesium bonds holding the calcium together. It doesn't have any collagen in there, allowing the chalk to bend. There's no water in there at all, so we can easily break it. You don't want your bones to be like that. But the medicines, if you're on them too long, or if you're sensitive to them, will create that type of situation. Okay? Now, medicines. You all know that every medicine you take has to do more good than bad, right? Has to do more benefit than harm. Cost benefit needs to be in your favor for every medicine you take. It just so happens that it's different for every situation and every person. For example, most people who are in the green, looking at these medicines, should easily recognize that if they took those medicines are more likely to do much more harm than good for them. Same thing for people in the yellow. But people in the red, they're in trouble. I just outlined how you can die, that you're kind of a time bomb, that you don't have to do much if your bone density is that low, that you're in trouble. You got to get the heck out of red. You got to pull out all the stops, all out massive action. You got to throw the kitchen sink at this thing, including taking those medicines. So there's some in the prevention community, wellness community who say never take these medicines. I'm just not one of them, because honesty would dictate that if it was me, or if it was a loved one of mine, and my job was to get myself or these people out of trouble, I'm doing everything, including those medicines. Because they'll get you out of the red. They just don't get you much farther. Okay? They're designed for the person who's in the red, and then once you get out of the red, you stop taking them. Because then they're not in your favor anymore. They're more likely to do harm than good. Does that make sense? Everybody? Does that make sense? So that should give you more clarity on the medicines. The medicines should be last. So let's get back to A, B, C. A is activity, B is bring the bad stuff down, or bad stuff reduced. C is complete nutrition. But A is interesting because it isn't really what you're hearing. You're hearing that it's exercise, you're hearing that it's weight bearing, or weight resistance. Do you know that's not true? Okay, right now, I'm weight bearing. I'm standing, I could be standing all day long, fully weight bearing, and I'm telling you, I'm not doing a darn thing for my bone health. I'm not doing anything for my bone density. So let's take another example. Let's say that I do a lot of swimming, which is very healthy, great exercise, good for my heart, good for a lot of things. It's just a wonderful exercise. Swimming does nothing for your bone density. Bicyclists. Do you know bicyclists have a higher incidence of osteoporosis than the general population does? Remember, they're sitting. Elliptical. That's not just weight bearing. I'm moving now. That's a great exercise. Good for my heart, good for a lot of things. Aerobic, I burn calories, I'm moving, doesn't do anything for bone density. So I just cited 4 examples. Standing, swimming, bicycling, elliptical. What's wrong with those 4 things? There's no impact. Your feet aren't really hitting the ground. So there's a principle called Wolff and Davis law. Wolff actually refers to muscles and Davis refers to bones. Means that, and it also applies to skin and other tissues, where a particular type of tissue in your body, when it feels it's under attack, will make more of itself. Your bones do it to make bone spurs. Your skin does it to make a corn or a callus. When it's being abused, it makes more of itself. Your muscles, if you're working out your muscles think they're being abused, they're under attack, or they're just being worked on, they make more of themselves. The muscles get bigger. Your bones do the same thing. When the bone thinks that they're suffering the effects of the environment, which is a shock wave. Impact. The bones feel a shock wave. Now, if I walk this softly, really softly, there's a shock wave that's going all the way to the top of my head. I can't control it. I don't have to walk like this. That shock wave's going up to the top of my skeleton, stimulating bone growth, even if I walk softly. Okay? So we need that constant, repetitive shock wave to make our bones get stronger. It's called walking. Do runners score well? Yeah, they do. My machine knows walkers and knows runners. By the way, I haven't had anybody yet, I promise you this. I haven't had anybody come up to me and say, you know, Dr. Ken, you know how I got better? I started doing ice cream. Or I started doing dairy. I started doing cheese or yogurt. I haven't had anybody yet tell me that they improved their score with dairy. Isn't that kind of surprising? So when that happens, and it starts to happen a lot, I'll start telling you to do dairy. But right now, my opinions are formed by what I've seen over the years. I've tested thousands of people. I asked them, how'd you get better? How'd you get worse? And what's come forth is not what you would expect. Because I don't give you cookie cutter information. You can get that off the internet. There are people out there that are telling you what could happen, what could help your bones, what should help your bones, but I'm telling people what will help your bones because it tests well, and what I've seen to help well. Because you know what, we got to stop telling people cookie cutter stuff because it's not working. I can tell you this, the dairy industry has made millions off of this, and they have failed miserably. We've got to stop telling people this stuff if it doesn't work. Okay, there's even a study that came out a couple weeks ago. Some of you probably saw it, a British medical journal study that shows that bone density actually dairy consumption actually lowers your bone density in an adult. I mean, did it ever really ring true that the secretions of another animal would be your answer for bone health? Understand, you know, I'm not a vegetarian, and I have no dog in the fight. I don't have an agenda. I just want to tell people what works and what doesn't. I don't want you to waste your time. I want you to get results. I don't want you to do those exercises that don't get the results you're seeking. I want you to do the ones that will. And I want you to do other things that work and not the things that won't work. So now you know what activities work. I've just told you what activities don't work, and I've told you what activities do. So what I know is that runners can walk, but not all walkers can run. So I tell everybody to walk. Everybody here needs to double their walking if they can. Okay? I mean, if it's dancing for you, great. Maybe it's jumping rope. That's fine. But people ask me, well, Dr. Ken, what exercise should I do then? For me, what's appropriate for me? Well, it has to subscribe to this. The activity that you choose has to do this. One, has to be right for you. Maybe you need your doctor or your personal trainer involved. Two, you have to do it right. And three, you must be able to sustain it. You don't have to get cute. There's a YouTube video that I see sometimes out there from a bone health educator who's telling people to do this. That's a good way to get stress fractures, and you're not going to sustain that. You don't have to be clever with this. Walk. Do a lot of walking. We are meant to walk. I don't know if we were meant to swim. Maybe we were, but I do know that we're meant to walk. Okay? You don't have to do different weird things. Okay? All right. So everybody knows that A is really not A. It's really S. It's shockwave. So those of you who are wondering about weight resistance is great for the same reason. Weight resistance actually creates a shockwave. It stimulates A1 fibers to a lesser degree than impact does. So if weight resistance, weight training for you is right for you and you're doing it right and you can keep it up, great, do that. I just don't think it's right for everybody. I want you to do the thing that's right for you, but I want you to do it forever. Okay? So now you know what A is. Activity that works. Okay? B, bring the bad stuff down. Now, maybe I don't see a lot of people with pen and paper, but if you try to remember what I'm going to say here, or write it down if you can, because this is different for everybody. I'm going to run through a very short list of things I want you to do less of. Now, understand, this isn't to tell you you have to cut it out completely from your life. It's to not do it in excess. This is about moderation. Don't do any of the following in excess. You ready? Smoking. Soda. Soda is horrible for your bones. It has everything in there that if you want to become an osteoporosis terrorist, all you need is Coke. You go out there and you spread it around, spread osteoporosis around. But it has caffeine, it has sugar, low pH, it has phosphoric acid. By the way, the things you drink that have bubbles are not harming you. The bubbles aren't hurting you. It's what they put in things that have bubbles. And even energy drinks don't always have bubbles. It's what they put in it. It's not the bubbles. Okay? But soda's horrible for your bones. Smoking, soda, and sodium. Those are the three S's. Sodium meaning white table salt. Don't eat a lot of white table salt. Why do I say white? Because if it's white, that means they've taken the thing out of it that colors it. So if it's Himalayan salt, they have it. It's still in there. What are we talking about? We're talking about the minerals that colored it. Anything that colors salt, whether it's pink or gray or some other color, is always minerals. So if it's white, it means the minerals have been taken out. Okay? So don't do a lot of sodium because that's an established controllable risk factor. You're going to find out that I do a lot on the things you can control. Okay? Don't drink like a fish. Don't drink a lot. You can drink some. There are some forms of alcohol that are good for your bones. such as beer. Beer has silicon in it. Beer is actually good for your bones. But you do that in excess, it becomes bad for your bones. Alcohol in excess is a risk factor for osteoporosis. Don't drink more than 3 cups of regular coffee a day. Caffeine is a risk factor for osteoporosis. Now again, I'm not a vegan, I'm not a vegetarian, but I happen to know that animal protein is a risk factor for osteoporosis. Don't do a lot of it. Don't eat a lot of meat. So how much should you eat? Well, maybe a good guideline is this. You put your fists in front of you, your 2 fists in front of you, and that's your weekly supply of meat. That's not much. If you have meat in every single meal, that's 21 meals over the course of a week, right? That's not very much per meal. But you're probably not going to eat meat every meal anyway, and it's still not that much. Don't go beyond that. Don't eat a lot of meat because your bone density will go down. Okay? So now you know what B is. And I'm going to run through really quickly the medicines, not by each name, but by category. But I have to be careful here, because this isn't to tell you not to take your doctor's advice. Quite the contrary, I want you to take your doctor's advice. In fact, I want you to pass some of this information by your doctor, especially if you test poorly. So let's say you did test with me tonight, and I give you your sheet. You're going to be in the green or yellow and the red. You're going to go to your doctor. Before you ask any questions, you hand this to your doctor. So the questions that come forth with your present situation in mind. This isn't about you going against your doctor. It's about you asking the right questions. Okay? For example, maybe you're going to score in the green, and the doctor says, you know, you've been on Synthroid for a while, and you really need it. Really need to keep you on that. I really don't want to take you off it. And it's obviously not affecting you too much. You've got some leeway. You're staying on the Synthroid. Or maybe you're in the red, and you've been on 5 milligrams of prednisone for quite a while, and your doctor's been wondering, should I get her off it? Maybe should I or should I not? And then she receives your results that shows you in the red. She says, oh yeah, you're going off this stuff now. You don't even need it that much anyway. I did not know you were in the red. You're going off of it. So it helps your doctor make the right decisions. Okay? Okay, so here are the categories. The following categories of medicine will lower your bone density, will put you at risk for fracture. Here they are. Medicines for cancer. Medicines for hypothyroidism. Now, to have a thyroid condition, whether it's high or low, will put you at risk for osteoporosis, can lower your bone density. But to take a medicine for it worsens it, especially if it's low thyroid that you have. Okay? A lot of times there are medicines for hypothyroidism. Medicines for epilepsy, anticonvulsants. Medicines for asthma, yes, including Advair. Protein pump inhibitors, that's just a lot of words for the medicines that they prescribe for an acid stomach. Okay? They include Nexium and Prilosec, lowers your bone density. Okay? Certain types of antihistamines as well. Prednisone turns your bones to dust. Now, a lot of people need to be on it, though, for various reasons, and when they are on it, they need to be tapered off of it. So you never just go off your prednisone, but just bear in mind, it's a formidable force toward loss of bone. Okay? It thins your bones as it thins your skin. It thins tissues. But typically, when your doctor puts you on that, it means you really needed to be on it. Okay? Okay, so the last category of medicines that put you at risk for bone fracture is the following. You ready? Medicines for osteoporosis. Go figure. Because maybe you weren't a candidate for it and you were put on it. Maybe you're sensitive to it. Maybe you've been taking it for more than 5 years. Okay? So you see why the medicines are meant for just some? They're overutilized. The lawsuits are piling up with these medicines. I don't even think they're going to be around that much longer. But I just want you to have a good perspective. If you're in the red, I'm sorry, you have to take them because you don't have any choice. You're at risk. You're in trouble. You got to get out of trouble. But once you get out of trouble, get the heck off of those medicines, okay? Hope that gives you a realistic perspective on the medicines. So they don't make your bones strong. They make your bones what? They make your bones hard. And therein lies the issue of frozen bone syndrome. You've heard of people who, if they're on these medicines too long, will actually break their hip because they've been on the medicines. Well, your bones don't get cold. They don't freeze. They just use that term frozen bone syndrome to depict that they turn into chalk. So if you're on them too long, they put you at risk for hip fracture. Okay? So that's B. Things you need to bring down as well as your doctor needs to bring down for you. Okay? And then C is complete nourishment. A lot of people are taking too much calcium. We're not recommending that people take as much calcium as we did before. I think 500 to 900 is a good range. I don't think anybody needs to take more than 900 milligrams of calcium a day. And yes, it does cause certain problems. It even puts you at risk for an MI, a heart attack, if you're not taking it properly, if you're taking it in excess, and you're taking it without the family of ingredients that are meant to accompany the calcium as it comes in. Okay? Don't take too much calcium. With vitamin D, it's the opposite. Most people are not taking as much vitamin D as they ought to. The Vitamin D Council thinks that most people should be taking 5,000 IUs or more. 5,000. Researchers that I've run into, a lot of them are taking 50,000 a day. I happen to know that you can't go toxic with vitamin D3 unless you go over 100,000 IUs. I'm not telling you to do that. What I'm going to tell you to do is get tested. Because you know what? If you're not tested and you don't know your current value, and I'd be willing to tell you that very few people here know their current level. If you don't do that, you don't know how much to take. You're guessing. Your doctor shouldn't even guess either. You need to know. It needs to be according to your current level, because how much you take of vitamin D needs to be that which gets you to a goal. What is that goal? It's to get you to 50 nanograms per milliliter. Some say 60. Don't believe the lab report. The lab report, when they say 20 to 33 is normal, it's not. This means you're not going to get rickets. Okay? You need to get it up to 50 or 60. And when you plug your number into that table that the Vitamin D Council has, it'll tell you how much to take. And chances are you're going to find out you're taking far less than you thought you needed. Okay? It's hard to take too much. Your body's trying so hard to make vitamin D, and you all live in Southern California. Statistically, 70% of you are low in vitamin D. But let's say you're one of the 30%. Let's say you're on a high level. I don't run into many people who have a high vitamin D level. But if you're one of them, great. God bless you. You don't need much. But if you're low, like most people are, you need a lot. Okay, so knowing what your level is and putting it in that table to tell you how much you need to take is being accurate. Okay? So know what your level is, because it's about getting to that level. Why am I recommending you get that high with your vitamin D? All kinds of good things happen to your body. You want to hear what happens to your body when you get to 50 nanograms per milliliter? You offset 80% of cancers, including breast cancer. You lower your blood pressure. You give yourself balance. All this has been proven out through studies, that you don't fall as easily. Your balance is greater. You offset heart disease. Getting yourself to 50 or higher is a better flu shot than the flu shot is. People who take ridiculous amounts of vitamin D, they feel terrific. They want to keep doing it because they feel good. So that corresponds to what you heard recently about people who have issues of depression, who get their vitamin D level up, lower their depression. Well, do you think it's just for people who have depression, or do you think a lot of people feel better when they have their vitamin D level higher? Probably everybody feels better. Okay? Offsets diabetes. There's so many things that vitamin D does. So the reason why it's fooled us for so long about vitamin D is because it doesn't follow the rules of vitamins. Why? Because it's not one. It's not a vitamin. It's a prohormone. And I can say this, it's even more important than you putting attention to calcium. The more vitamin D you take, the less calcium you need. But you can't say the opposite. The more vitamin D you take, the less calcium you need. The higher your level of vitamin D, the less need for calcium. Okay? You know they've gone back 60 years? They haven't found a reported overdose of vitamin D yet. Okay? So you get the picture? Get your vitamin D level up. Find out what your level is and get it higher. Okay? So now you know that it's quite likely you could be taking too much calcium and not enough vitamin D. That's what it means to be complete. Complete nutrition or complete supplementation. By the way, our own space program is way ahead of our medical system in osteoporosis. Believe me, they are. They're way ahead. One of the things that they concluded is that they weren't getting results from calcium supplements. And by the way, they don't follow FDA guidelines at all. They follow their own rules. They do their own studies, and they found out that they weren't getting results from calcium supplements. They were getting it from something called bentonite. Some of you women know what bentonite is. It's clay that you might put on your face to detoxify your face, to provide minerals to your face. It's clay. It's what the Native Americans consumed for thousands of years. It has lots of minerals in it. You can take it internally as long as it says that on the jar. And they were getting results from bentonite, clay. But they weren't getting it from calcium. It kind of makes you wonder, because we're so often so clean with our food, whether our food is supposed to be dirty. Who knows? I don't know. But you do want the minerals. Okay? So you get the picture on what it means to be complete. Okay, so now you know what A, B, and C are, right? Okay, so I'm going to pause, and maybe I can answer some questions. And yeah.
What's the rationale for taking supplement of both calcium and vitamin D? And what's the principle why the more vitamin D you take, less calcium?
Because vitamin D allows you to absorb it and allows you to get it to bone. Now, I don't really think they should be taken together. And when I say together, I don't really think you should rely on the vitamin D that's in your calcium supplement. They're often together. But why? Because if your need is really to raise your vitamin D, do you want to be raising your calcium up with it? That's kind of why they have to be separate. Because if you're wanting to raise your D, you don't want to have to be raising your calcium with it. How much D you need to take depends on your level. You need to get tested. Get tested every 6 to 12 months. Find out what your level is.
And then the second point is, if calcium is generally the most popular dietary supplement. Now, calcium is known for constipation. How would you combat the side effect of?
You know, that's a tough one. First of all, take it with food. That allows you to absorb more liquid.
It's like a cement, it's in the body. And,
I think the best way to combat that.
And you mentioned about the water, not too much, but actually water is needed.
Constipation is an issue with a lot of people taking calcium supplements. And I'm going to try not to get too technical here, but I'm going to answer your question. If I had that issue with taking calcium, I would take something called lactoferrin. Lactoferrin, some of you might have heard about. It's expensive stuff. You find it in the better nutrition stores. Life Extension, Niken, there are a whole bunch of brands for it. Lactoferrin is what helps you process calcium so it absorbs smoothly and it gets the bone smoothly.
How do you spell it?
Lactoferrin. Lactoferrin. Your body's trying to make lactoferrin, by the way. Your body makes it. It doesn't make enough. As we get older, or as we succumb to a lot of toxins that enter our body, we need more lactoferrins because they don't have any free receptors. Their hands are full trying to detoxify you that they can't grab that calcium molecule and escort it to bone. That's what they do. They're an escort system. Your calcium won't get to bone unless there's lactoferrin in your body. So I want you to think of this. I want you to think of the relay race that we see in the Olympics with the baton. You all see that race? You know what I'm talking about? Where the first runner hands off the baton to the second runner who takes that baton to the finish line? Okay, think about that now. That baton, think of it as your minerals, including your calcium. The minerals or the baton is not getting around the track or through your circulation by itself. No matter how good a baton you have, it's not going to circle the track by itself unless a runner takes it there. And in the end, it's not about a baton anyway. It's really about the runners. There is a relay race happening in your body. There's a lactoferrin molecule in your GI tract called gastroferrin that your body's trying really hard to make. It's the first runner. It grabs onto the calcium. It also grabs onto iron too, and it starves all the bad bacteria. This is really good for your body because it kills the bad bacteria. But it grabs onto minerals, including calcium, and takes it to the intestinal mucosa, the junction between the outside of your body and the inside of your body, takes it to the membrane, and just on the other side of that veil, that membrane, is your bloodstream. And it hands it off to the second runner, the other lactoferrin molecule called osteoferrin. I apologize, you asked. But if that other lactoferrin molecule will take it all the way to bone. Now your calcium becomes safe. Now your calcium starts to work. If you can meet the demand of the calcium with the lactoferrins by getting that at the nutrition store, your calcium becomes really effective and really safe. That's how you make your calcium work. Did I lose anybody with that? Lactoferrins, I want you to learn about. It's what makes your calcium work, and it's what makes your calcium safe. It's actually more important because we're actually more deficient in lactoferrins than we are in calcium. Calcium is something that's really been overblown as to its importance. We're finding out now that silicon could be actually more important because silicon does a lot of things. Silicon actually helps you make the collagen. You can't make collagen, you can't make the bony matrix without silicon. It leaves the scene once it happens, so it fooled us. We thought we didn't need silicon because it's not in healthy bone. Well, no, it isn't. It already did its job, and it left. But now we're finding out that silicon might be more important than calcium. Bottom line is, we need all the minerals. We need about 12 different minerals, which you might find in bentonite. You might find in a good mineral supplement, but we need much more than calcium, particularly vitamin D. Yeah?
Is magnesium one of them?
Magnesium is one of them for some. There's a lot of controversy about magnesium as to whether that really is something we need to address that much, because some people are getting it from their diet, some aren't. I think it's a good thing to address. There's dispute whether you should try to get a 2-to-1 ratio of calcium to magnesium or a 1-to-1. You may want to look into the foods that have magnesium to try to get an idea whether you think you need it, whether you're getting it in your diet or not. But if you want to know what magnesium does, it's the glue in your bone that holds the calcium together. Okay? And the collagen provides the honeycomb matrix because you can't deposit anything into bone unless there's a honeycomb there to receive it. That's collagen. That's why they found out that plant protein raises your bone density and animal protein lowers it, because plant protein raises your collagen level. Yeah.
Did you mention something about when you take your vitamins is important? I mean,
With vitamin D, it doesn't matter as much. You can take that any time of day. And by the way, vitamin D is cheap. Get enough of it. But with calcium, you try to spread it out. So if you're dealing with 3 different pills, let's say 300 milligrams, 300 milligrams, 300 milligrams, which would be max. Take one with breakfast, one with lunch, one with dinner, because you want to spread it out and you want to take it with food because you absorb so much more if you're taking it with food.
is that of all of your vitamins?
You know, that really pertains to a lot of your vitamins. The principles of spreading things out, the principle of taking things with food, not because you have to, because you're going to cause harm in some way, but because you can. If you can take supplements with food, it affords you an opportunity to absorb more of it. So those are the principles. You spread it out, you take it with food. And by the way, if you're wondering, well, I have a choice of morning or evening, which one should I take? Tend to veer toward the evening, which is good news, because when you forgot to take in the morning, you still have a chance. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, the issue of weight bearing, I was a little confused there, what we should be doing.
Okay. You should try to get a variety of exercises, okay? But if you want to focus it toward bone and make your bones benefit optimally, you're going to benefit from a shock wave that subscribes to the Wolf and Davis law that stimulates bone growth. Where does that come from? It comes largely from impact with your feet hitting the ground. It might occur from weight resistance too, because that creates a little bit of a shock wave too. But your feet hitting the ground repetitively, walking or running, stimulates bone growth. Okay, you can't make up for it by falling off the Empire State Building and hitting the ground once. Did I answer your question?
Well, so, you know, it's like lifting weights is not good.
No, it is good, but I don't think it's right for everybody. There's another principle of why weight resistance is helpful too. This is interesting. Arnold Schwarzenegger and anybody who builds their body up with lots of muscle will have strong bones. Why? Because of just how clever your body is. He could have become a muscle builder without addressing his bone situation at all. And while he built bones, he was building bone. Why? Because your body won't allow disproportion. It won't let you have a skinny skeletal frame and all these muscles around it. Your body will meet the demand. That's what the thought is behind weight resistance. So, by the way, osteoporosis is a pediatric disease. Have you heard that before? You'll hear it again. Osteoporosis is a pediatric disease with geriatric consequences. So what does that mean? It kind of explains some of the people that come forth to me and get tested, and I'll ask them, wow, you did pretty well. How are you scoring so well? And that person might say, nothing, I'm not really doing anything. Are you taking bone health supplements? Are you doing a lot of walking? Did you inherit strong bones? And that person might say, no. But then I might say, What about when you were a child? Were you an athlete? Oh yeah, I was an athlete. I was a runner, a marathon runner, or as a ballet dancer. Or my parents were ridiculous about making sure that I got good nutrition. But it all happens when you're young, because what you're essentially doing is you're teaching your bones how to make bone, which to some extent will stay with you to a degree. So that's what they mean by you do things early, or that's why it's a pediatric disease with geriatric consequences. Yeah?
Now, there are tests in regards to how good are your plants. Now, is there a clinical test, aside from going to the laboratory and doing the bone density? Maybe you put it like people who lift weight, the body responds in such a way that is commensurate to what's going on in the bone by being muscle mass. Would you consider that as a soft test that you're doing okay in your plan?
That translates to bone health?
Yeah, that your plan is working. Because
No. The three ways you're going to know. I'm going to tell you. Go.
The hard way of detecting how good your plan is working is through the dexamethasone test and other tests in the laboratory. But is there a clinical way of measuring out that you're doing all right?
Short answer is no. There are 4 ways to know whether you're at risk for bone. 1 is a history of fracture.
Right.
2 is DEXA scan. 3 is ultrasound bone density testing, which I have out there. The other one is computerized tomography. It's a silent disease. You can't know it by symptoms, and you can't detect it by body performance or through clinical means. No, the answer is no. Those are the 4 ways you know. By the way, I want you all to know the difference between a DEXA scan and what I'm doing out there, and why they're apples and oranges. I want you to get this. The letter D shows up a lot here. A DEXA scan is for your doctor to diagnose with. A DEXA scan is for your doctor to differentiate 3 different parts of your body. By the way, if you got the label or the diagnosis of osteoporosis or osteopenia, it simply meant that you had that in one of those 3 areas. And then you qualified for the entire diagnosis, which means you can have normal bones. You might have a variety of T-scores because every bone has a different T-score. So getting back to that, a DEXA is for your doctor to diagnose and differentiate. A DEXA is also for the doctor to monitor the skeletal effects of drugs. So it helps your doctor qualify you for a medicine, but also to medical legally defend not putting you on it. Okay? It's really a nice thing for your doctor. My problem with DEXA is that people don't understand the results, and doctors aren't sharing it with you. Maybe they don't have time, but people don't understand their DEXA results, and it's disengaging. Nobody is thrilled by the results that come forth on a DEXA scan. It doesn't really mean a whole lot to them. With that, this allows you to do it early, often, no radiation. It allows you, you're doing 1 bone, you're getting the heel bone. But understand now, the heel bone is the best bone to get if you're going to get 1 bone. If you have osteoporosis is going to show up in every bone in your body. So what that means is you need 1 bone. You need at least 1 bone. And if you're going to get 1 bone, you want to get the best bone. And I'll spare you the 8 to 10 reasons why the heel bone is the best bone to get. For one thing, it's the best predictive. It predicts other bones better, predicts the likelihood of other bones breaking more than they can predict themselves. That's one of the reasons. But with that, it allows you to self-monitor. You could do it early and often and have your finger on the pulse of your progress. So if you can't get another DEXA scan for another 2-3 years, simply because your insurance company doesn't want to pay for it, you can do this. So you got to plug in the blanks. So now you can know every 6 months how you're doing. ISCD says you can show a statistically significant change in as soon as 6 months. What does that mean? You can know every 6 months whether your plan's working or not working. You can do that with that. Good luck doing that with a DEXA scan. Now, am I saying not to get a DEXA scan? No, I think you should get one because it is good to get a diagnosis, and it is good to corroborate one test against another. Get as many DEXA scans as you possibly can. Unfortunately, you're not going to get nearly as many as you need because your insurance company doesn't want to pay for them. Get as many of those, you're going to find yourself doing it much more often, and it's going to be much more engaging. The people I test every 3 months, those people get better faster. We've done this with people in Gardena, done it with people in Chicago, that the people who ratchet up their testing are ratcheting up their awareness, they're ratcheting up the results, and they get better faster. There was a study done at Cornell Hospital in the year 2005, done over 6 years. Now, this is going to sound like magic to you, going to be hard for you to believe that this is true. What they found out was people who got screened for osteoporosis, they had their bone density screened, they had a 36% less likelihood of breaking their hip than people who didn't. Had nothing to do with what they did about it. This is just, did you get screened or not screened? But the people who got screened had a 36% less likelihood of breaking their hip. So how could that be? You tell me. Somebody tell me how just getting screened will lower your incidence of breaking your hip.
Do something about it. You take action.
That's one reason, yes.
Be careful.
Yep. Aren't you now going to be making maybe a fewer more of the right decisions because of what you learned? Aren't you going to make maybe a little bit less of the wrong decisions? Aren't you going to make a habit out of some? Maybe you're going to forget where you learned it. Maybe some of it's going to be subconscious. Maybe you'll get off the couch a little more often because of that little awareness. It's called awareness, and it's powerful. And I happen to think it's more than 36% because most screenings aren't done well. Here, if you get screened, this is a little bit more of a learning experience than you get when you get tested. So I happen to think screening's done well, it's more than 36%. Yeah?
Would you differentiate between DEXA and QCT scan?
QCT, computerized tomography, isn't done that often. You have to understand, when you use QCT or just a standard radiograph or an X-ray, there's a lot of objective assessment. The doctor's looking at this and says your bone's washed out, or not. Okay? It's not, to some degree it's quantitative because they're getting numbers, but they're not able to correlate it with large populations, a large reference data, because what makes a DEXA so much better is because we have so many studies that show population studies where I can compare you against someone your age, against someone in your ethnicity. Because what this is about comparing you against the population. I want to bring your attention to this line here. You see how this line, can you all see this curved line? You want to know what this curved line refers to? It refers to Caucasian females in the United States. But there's reason to believe you don't have to be Caucasian. This probably refers to the female population. We don't have enough studies on men to form their line. I happen to know where the man's line would be, but I'm going to tell you, this is accurate. You'll see this curve a lot. What this suggests is what happens at menopause, where a woman can lose up to 30% of her bone mass to 5 to 7 years of following menopause. So we're measuring you against the population. Let's say that you're here. You're a premenopausal woman, hasn't gone through her dip yet, because all women go through a dip. You're premenopausal, and you think you're sitting pretty here. You're fine, you're in the green. You're not. Think about this. If you're 2 inches below that line there, and you're going to go through your dip, and you're likely going to parallel this line, and you're 2 inches below here, and you're 2 inches below there, and you're 2 inches below there, what does it mean that you scored in there? You're headed for the red. You got to get up here, because you're going to dip. You got to get high enough into the green so you can withstand that dip, that you're going to stay in the green. So what this is, it isn't just telling you where you're at, it's telling you where you're headed if you do nothing. It's like your extended, it's better than your 10-day weather extended forecast. More accurate. Okay, so this tells you where you're headed if you do nothing. See why we need to do younger ages and women who are premenopausal too, and men? And by the way, this isn't official, but I think the man's is a straight line that goes from there to there.
What's the
Just out of
meaning
experience.
6 to 12 MOL?
Okay, so this also tells you how often you ought to do it if your interest is in prevention. You're not going to hear this from your insurance company or from your doctor, because the medical delivery system is about problem solving, crisis intervention. If your interest is in wellness and prevention, not getting the problem, you want to have your finger on the pulse of your progress. You want to be doing those often so you prevent yourself from getting in trouble. So if you score in the green today, because I tested you over there and you score in the green, you can wait 6 to 12 months. You can wait 12 months to get tested. If you're in trouble, well, you better know in 6 months whether your plan's working or not. Because if it's not working, you got to change it. If it is working, you can keep it. But you better know as soon as you can know, because you're in trouble. You don't have the luxury of time. You better test in 6 months. Good luck getting that with a DEXA scan. If you're in the red, I'm going to tell you to do that again in 6 months so we can get you up there. If you're in the yellow, it's just between the two. That's all. Does that make sense? I formulated that guideline in my book, Bone Health Made Easy, because no one had ever set up guidelines if your interest is in preventing the problem rather than managing it once you have it. Okay? Everybody here should get tested. I'll stick around as long as we need to get to everybody. Yeah?
One quick question, sir. You said 2 fists size of meat during a week. Now, by meat, you eat beef or do you eat everything? Chicken,
Well,
veggie?
you're going to hear health-wise that red meat's not good for you, and it isn't, but the distinction with bone density has never been between white and red. I guess there's not enough studies to be able to discern between the two. It's animal protein, which, you know what? Includes dairy. Do you know there are 30 animal proteins in dairy? Should it be any wonder that dairy doesn't really help? You ever wonder why we're not hearing about taking green tea for our bones? Because green tea is so healthy and there's a lot of antioxidants or even minerals in green tea, but why aren't we hearing that that's good for our bones? Because there's caffeine in it too. Milk is a wash. It has calcium, but it also has bad stuff. Green tea has great stuff in it, but it also has a little bit of caffeine. When you've got good and bad, they almost neutralize each other. There are a lot of things out there that are a wash. Your Himalayan salt is the best salt you could probably take, but don't do too much of it because it's a wash. Yeah, it has minerals, but it also has sodium. Don't listen to those people who tell you to take Celtic salt or mineral salts for bones. No, it's a wash. It has good and bad. Does that make sense, what I mean by a wash? Yeah. There's not a lot of minerals in dairy. There's calcium. And by the way, there's no vitamin D in milk. And they put it in it. And I'm going to tell you right now, the 6 foods on planet Earth that have vitamin D. And then that's all there is. It's just these 6. And they're not health foods, by the way. Fatty fish, egg yolk, pork, yes, pork, liver of all animals, because liver makes vitamin D, certain types of mushrooms, and certain types of algae. Good luck with that. That's why we don't think you can get enough from your diet, because it's hard to get enough of that. Nobody thinks you can. Okay? The best fruit for bone health, they still don't know why, is plums. They validated this again at the University of South Florida. They did it twice, and it came out the same both times. That plums are far and away the healthiest fruits for your bones. Apples were number 2, but far behind. The one green leafy vegetable that has the most calcium in it isn't kale, and it isn't broccoli, it's collard greens. And what has more calcium in it than green leafy vegetables is sesame seeds. Crush them. Put them on your salad. It's called tahini dressing. More calcium is in that dressing than what's underneath it. Okay, so now you know what foods you get. And by the way, if you're wondering what kind of foods to get enough calcium, well, it's seeds, nuts, green leafy vegetables, and beans. Seeds, nuts, green leafy vegetables, and beans. If you want to get silicon, because you're hearing a lot now about silicon, it's in beans, beets, and beer. It's in grains. Yeah. Yes, sir.
There's a medication spelled Prolia. I don't know, it's Prolia.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be good for the bones.
Well, if you're in red, you're in trouble. You have no choice. You got to take it. Okay, but you're in the green or yellow, I don't think the cost benefit is in your favor. Prolia is trying to say they're not a bisphosphonate, that they're not like all those other ones. No, they're a bisphosphonate too. They just land on the osteoclast rather than land on the bone. They're still a bisphosphonate. Okay? By the way, there are a lot more of you who are on those medicines than think you are. You want to know what I mean by that? Because if I have you raise your hand now, ask you if you're on that medicine or not, there's even more people in this building that are on these medicines than who think that they are. Why? Because some of you got a shot that you didn't really understand what your doctor was saying, didn't know what that long word meant, bisphosphonate. That shot was to address the medicine and keep you from having to talk about bone health when it's now in your body and it's in there for the next 10 years. It has a 10-year half-life. All right? It's in your body for a long time. And a lot of you have had that injection not knowing that you're on the medicine. You're on that medicine and you're on it for a long time now.
What injection?
There'll be Prolia, Reclast, and Actonil has an injection form too. If you want to know what those bisphosphonates are that I'm referring to, they are Fosamax, alendronate, reclass, Actonil, Prolia, the Sally Fields medicine, Boniva. Okay? And I didn't tell you not to take them. I tell you that only you take them if you need them.
Or Zometa and Exeva.
What's that?
Zometa and Exeva.
Yeah, those are proprietary names. Yeah.
Why do people tend to die from a hip fracture?
Good question. Now, if you go online tonight and you look that up, this is what you're going to learn. You're going to learn that it's largely because of the hospitalization, that if you were to break your hip because you had osteoporosis, that you're likely going to end up in the hospital. Whether or not you're going to have surgery or not, you're going to end up in the hospital. Now, we know that a lot of bad things happen when you end up in the hospital. Okay? Doctors often say a hospital is no place for anybody that's sick. What happens? Well, things like over-medication, pneumonia, blood clots, infection, a lot of things happen. That's really the reason. Now, I want to share something with you. My mom, who broke her hip and she was gone 6 weeks later, she was 85 years old and frail, and she had no business undergoing the knife. But all 7 of us kids said she needed to. The reason was they had to drive a rod across her hip to give her relief. If I break my hip right now, you're all nice people. You're going to come to my aid. You're going to want me to not have pain. You're going to give me relief. You're going to position my body in a position where I'm not bearing weight on a broken bone. So you tell me right now how I must position my body in the presence of a hip fracture so I'm not bearing weight on a broken bone. Tell me. How must I position my body? If I'm on my back, let's say I'm on my good side. I'm now torquing the fracture fragment. I'm separating, that's worse. If I'm on my bad side, I'm bearing direct weight on it. If I'm sitting down, oh, that's bearing weight on it. If I'm standing up, can't do that. I'm walking together. I've got to be an astronaut. I've got to be floating. The point is, if you're in that much pain and the meds aren't doing it for you, and you can't get comfortable, because no matter how you place your body, you're hurting your fracture fragment, that's called emotional turmoil. And I don't know if you can do a study on that. And I happen to think that the human will is very strong. I think we can turn on the give up and we can turn off the give up when we get older. So that's your answer. You'll get some people say, no, it's the collapse of the skeletal frame. You're crushing the different organ systems. That your system goes through a metabolic cascade. That your system literally goes haywire. Just understand, when you break your hip, it's not like breaking any other bone. So statistics say if you break a bone, typically, you're going to be better in 6 months. That bones heal in 6 months or less. Otherwise, you consider a delayed union. Statistics also say that if you break your hip, statistically, 6 months later, instead of being healed, you will still have an 85% chance of needing help, simply to get from one side of the room to the other, if it's your hip that you broke. Okay? So anyway, I'm gonna stop now, and I'm going to suggest as many of you as possible come up to me, get screened. I'll give you something you can take to your doctor. You'll understand your results right on the spot. Thank you, everybody.